Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is time for reflection, and our time for reflection leader today is the Right Reverend Dr. Ian Greenshields, the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland.
Good afternoon. Can I first of all bring to you the very best wishes of the Church of Scotland and assure Parliament that the length and breadth of this nation, our churches are praying for Parliament on a regular basis. This comes from Luke chapter 10. Which of these do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Good leadership, rooted in service for others, is essential for the good of any society. The short passage I read at the beginning is an interaction between Jesus and a Jewish religious leader, where Jesus, in response to the question, who is my neighbour, tells the familiar story that we know as the Good Samaritan. Much has been made of that wonderful responsive story by Jesus, but often we forget that these concluding remarks between Jesus and his contemporary are fundamental. The heart of the story is the one who showed mercy, reflecting the quality of love expected by Jesus. In the ancient Hebrew language, the word for mercy speaks of the unconditional love that a parent has for their child. It is therefore a powerful and primal concept. Indeed, mercy and forgiveness are at the very heart of Christian identity. Within the Christian tradition, we understand that we receive mercy as a gift from God through Jesus Christ. Yet Jesus expects that a gift of such magnificence and grace and magnitude that is so freely given and gladly received by us should be personally expressed in all of our relationships. Love and mercy is not always easy. Love for our neighbour, that person in need, whoever they are. Love given in every way that we can. Love even for our enemies, as Jesus said, is not a suggestion, but a command. Love your enemies, he said, and pray for them. To show mercy, then, and to act out of love is not primarily a feeling, but an act of the will, even when we are deeply hurt and offended by someone else. It is to give to another what they do not deserve, because we realize that we are the recipients of greater mercy. What then is most important when it comes to the qualities of leadership? Is it charisma, intelligence, real-life experience, popularity, vision? Or is it people who can be depended upon to show kindness, grace, forgiveness, and a generous heart and unconditional love and mercy in every circumstance.
Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you.
The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1, I call Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on targeted councillor funding for the colleges and universities.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
Since 2019-20, we've invested over £13.5 million to provide almost 90 additional councillors in colleges and universities, exceeding our programme for government commitment to support the recruitment of 80 such posts. We are committed to meeting our programme government commitment to provide additional funding for the entirety of academic year 2022-23. We're the only UK nation funding student councillor provision in this way.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the Minister for that response. Last week, the Education, Children and Young People's Committee published the College Regionalisation Report. The report found that this targeted councillor funding was critical for students. So can I ask the Minister, has demand for mental health counselling increased over the 4-year period in which dedicated funding for counsellors have been provided? And how will future demand for these services be met if this financial support is not available beyond the end of this academic year?
Minister.
Well, just on that last point, what I would say to Ms Gossel is one of the things we've committed to is taking forward the publication of a student mental health action plan. That will be forthcoming very shortly. We have not made any final decision in respect of further funding beyond the end of the year, so no final decision has been taken in that regard. We recognise the importance of the investment we've made thus far. We do want to see the work that's been done there to be enabled to continue to support students through what we know has been a difficult and challenging time, and fundamentally that's what the Mental Health Action Plan will continue to seek to respond to.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the Minister for that response. Minister, we already know the drastic reduction some colleges will be making in response to the SNP's funding settlement. One college is planning for staff redundancies up to 25% over the next few years. This is not a unique situation. 21 college principals have written to the Scottish Government pleading for help. These counsellors can provide a life-saving service for many students who are struggling with their mental health. Following these pleas, can I ask the Minister, will he set out the Government's position on compulsory redundancies and ensure that all college students can access the services they need?
Minister.
Well, just on the point that Ms Gossel has made around the letter from the 21 college principals, I'm aware of that correspondence. We will, of course, as you would expect of the Government, reply to that. But what I can say is I've been in very close contact with college principals over the last period to discuss the very issues that we are touching upon today. I've made as clear to them as I am to Ms Gossel around our commitment to the Student Mental Health Action Plan and what we might be able to do in subsequent years. In relation to funding for colleges, of course, we have leveraged in additional resource for colleges for this coming year. But I would respectfully say to Ms Gossel, it isn't good enough to stand there, as she does week in, week out, to call for additional funding for not just this sector, but virtually every sector across government expenditure, without identifying where it will come from. So I look forward to hearing her say where that will come from now.
Thank you. As members might expect, there is a lot of interest, so concise questions and responses will enable more members to take part. And can I call CoCab Stewart?
Thank you. My understanding is that since 2019-20, the Scottish Government has invested in almost 90 additional counsellors in colleges and universities. Some of these institutions are, of course, private organisations and have their own role to play in ensuring provision for the well-being of their students. Can the Minister say something about how the work of these professionals, including those provided through government funding, will complement the work of the upcoming Student Mental Health Plan?
Minister.
Well, let me pick up on an important point that Co-Cap Stewart has made. She is right to identify that the institutions that we are providing funding for fundamentally have a core responsibility here. They themselves have to make sure that they are adequately responded to and supporting their students' mental health needs. Now, we have, of course, assisted with that. We provide a substantial package of funding to universities and colleges. We provided this additional funding to support the recruitment of these counsellors, and through our Student Mental Health Action Plan, we will seek to build on that to make sure that we're supporting the resilience and mental well-being of students across the country.
Katie Clark.
128,000 people have signed a petition to the UK Government calling for the creation of a statutory legal duty of care for students in higher education. A duty of care already exists for staff and for students under 18. Would the Minister explore introducing a statutory legal duty of care for students in colleges and universities?
Minister.
Well, I can't earnestly say that it will be me that's doing it, of course, but that is something I think that the Government should reflect on.
Willie Rennie.
It's a little bit more positive what the Minister says, that no final decision has been made about future funding. But it does leave these staff in limbo, and I hope that the Minister will act with a little bit more haste to make a quicker decision about this. Because these mental health counsellors have provided an invaluable service for vulnerable students across the college and university sector. So how much longer will they have to wait?
Minister.
Look, I understand the point that Mr Rennie makes, and it is one I take seriously, because we do have to try and give that clarity. He'll understand, of course, we have to go through the usual process that we undertake, and we have made that commitment to the Student Mental Health Action Plan, which will be forthcoming very soon. And my own perspective is that we shouldn't disaggregate these issues too much. But I take on board the point, and it's something we need to provide in terms of clarity to the institutions as soon as possible.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. The Health and Wellbeing Census shows that for many young people, challenges with their mental health begin at school, before college or university. So can I ask the Minister for an update on what progress has been made towards the Butte House Agreement commitment that every young person has a right to access in-school mental health counselling if they so require it, which should hopefully in turn reduce the demand for college and university mental health support services?
Minister.
Well, this is a fair reminder that we have a duty to support the mental well-being of all young people in Scotland. We continue to provide £16 million to local authorities towards the commitment to make sure that every secondary school has access to counselling services. Authorities across the country have confirmed that all schools do have such access. Authorities provide us with 6 monthly reports on the services, and the latest reports to be analysed show that just over 14,500 young people accessed the service between January and June 2022, with over 6,000 of those young people reporting improved outcomes, with the majority of the remaining young people still accessing the service and with their outcomes to yet be captured but to be reported in due course.
Question number 2, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking in response to recent reported analysis by Health Equals, which shows that poverty-driven health inequalities are reducing life expectancy amongst people who live in the most deprived areas.
Minister Marie Todd.
We are using all of the powers and resources available to us to tackle poverty, reduce inequality, increase healthy life expectancy and thus create a fairer Scotland. The Scottish Government has allocated almost £3 billion across 22 to 23 to mitigate the damage inflicted on households by the UK Government's cost of living crisis. We're providing free school meals, increasing the numbers of hours of free childcare. We've already increased the Scottish Child Payment to £25 per week, supported 1.85 million households with council tax reduction and uprated all benefits that we deliver. We'll continue to deliver free prescriptions, concessionary travel, free personal care and our Fair Work agenda.
Faisal Chowdhury.
I thank the Minister for that answer. As co-convener of the cross-party group on improving Scotland's health and as a member of the Social Justice and Social Security Committee, I'm well aware of the disparities faced in Scotland in terms of health. In 2018, a study showed that a boy born in Muirhouse had a life expectancy of 13 years shorter than that of a boy born in neighbouring Cramond. Analysis from the Health Foundation reported that the average life expectancy in Scotland has reduced by 4.4 years since 2013. In addition, drug-related deaths have increased and are 18 times higher in the most deprived areas when compared to the list. Can the Minister confirm what steps the Scottish Government have taken to address these health inequalities and the specific health conditions that disproportionately affect those from the most deprived areas?
Minister.
So we absolutely recognise the clear and inextricable links between health inequalities and poverty, and that's why we're using all of the powers and resources available to us to support families as far as possible and to tackle the underlying causes of inequality in our national mission to tackle child poverty. We're also, as you're aware, being on the CPGs that you're in, we're also targeting people who have low incomes in our reaching out to provide healthy, life-changing... We are also targeting people who live in poverty with means to stop smoking. Measures like the minimum unit pricing of alcohol, which was aimed at the whole population, had a particular impact on people who live in poverty, and those who live in poverty were the ones who were most helped by that policy.
Faisal Chowdhury.
I thank the Minister for that answer. For individuals with diabetes, poverty-driven health inequalities are preventing them from accessing technologies advanced in the treatment of their condition. This has been highlighted by Diabetics Scotland. Diabetics Tech Cannot Wait campaign. This technology has a potential to change and indeed save the lives of those with type 1 diabetes. It can also reduce serious complications and the strain on the NHS. Can the Minister advise what action it will take to tackle the inequalities of access to the hybrid closed-loop diabetes technology in relation to its socio-economic background?
Minister.
Absolutely, and it's a great question. Those people have real difficulty accessing healthcare and navigating healthcare. One of the reasons that people who are experiencing health inequalities suffer poorer outcomes is because the system fails to respond to them and listen to them in the way that it does for those from a wealthier and more educated background who are more able to advocate for themselves. So undoubtedly, we will be making sure that the system begins to listen to absolutely everyone. We have a whole lot of money going into, and I can write to the member with details of how much money there is going into those particular diabetic technologies. It is a tragedy that people, one of the greatest predictors of people's health and life expectancy is their wealth. And it is an absolutely brutal tragedy that this Parliament is determined to tackle, and we will tackle it, but we will need cross-party support in order to make the bold decisions that do fundamentally tackle the underlying causes of poverty, as well as ensure that people who are living in poverty can access equal health care.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The analysis that Mr Chowdhury refers to, it makes it clear that 13 years of callous Tory austerity is now impacting every inch in the UK. Recent research by the Glasgow Centre for Population Health also linked Tory-led austerity to worsening health outcomes in the 20% most deprived areas of Glasgow and Dundee. So will the Cabinet Secretary just reiterate that the Scottish Government is committed to taking action within its powers to tackle the root causes of poverty and associated health inequalities?
Minister.
The member is absolutely right to raise this issue, and in fact, Faisal Chowdhury also mentioned the key date of 2013 for being when we started to see life expectancy reduce in Scotland. That is, the academics tell us, because of the Tory Lib Dem austerity measures that they brought in 2010, which had a direct
Let's hear the Minister.
Which is a policy which is absolutely life-shortening for people in Scotland. It has had a life-shortening impact on people living in Scotland. I hear them chuntering from a sedentary position 16 years. The academics are exceptionally clear on this point. Austerity, the political choice to pursue austerity politics, has been life-shortening for people in Scotland and continues to be so.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is the selection of the Parliament's nominee as First Minister, and a note explaining the procedures to be followed this afternoon has been made available to members. I have received 4 valid nominations for selection of the Parliament's nominee for First Minister, and I will now announce the nominations in alphabetical order. The nominations are Alex Cole-Hamilton, Douglas Ross, Anas Sarwar and Hamza Youssef, and I will ask each nominee to speak in support of their candidacy for up to 5 minutes. And after the nominees have spoken, members will be asked to cast their vote for their preferred candidate. A separate vote will be called for each candidate, and members can vote once, only once. And once all voting has been completed, any member who has not yet voted will be invited to cast a vote to abstain, and there will be a short suspension while the result is verified, and I will then announce the results of voting. A candidate will be elected if an overall majority is obtained. If no majority is obtained, the candidate or candidates with the smallest number of votes will be eliminated. And I would ask members to note that if we have a vote between only 2 candidates, all that is required is a simple majority for one of the candidates to be elected. And members may wish to record an abstention, and no account of those votes will be taken in establishing whether a simple majority has been achieved. And we will then proceed to a further round of voting. But I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I rise to speak to my candidacy for the office of First Minister of Scotland. I am a candidate in this contest because this is a democracy, and democracies are about the presentation of differing visions as to how things could be, about bringing to the fore the priorities of the constituents who sent us all here to this place. Here and now, we are as far as it is possible to be from a Scottish parliamentary election. We are midstream and have a governing party in disarray, adrift and out of ideas. It brings to mind the words of Robert Browning, who nearly 2 centuries ago wrote, "Glad was I when I reached the other bank. Now for a better country." The members in this chamber will reject my candidacy today. I understand that. But ours is a vision for that better country. You will not find a prospectus more positive or more ambitious from anyone else. Because Liberal Democrats believe in a Scotland that is industrious, innovative and internationalist of outlook. I want us to imagine things again, to make things again, to harness the collective potential of our peoples and our natural resources. A Scotland that delivers for those working in our schools, in our hospitals and in our fields. They are tired of the ministerial disinterest that has characterised much of this past 16 years. They are tired of a government fixated on the breakup of the United Kingdom. We have to put the people first. Liberal Democrats understand what matters to them because we ask them, door by door and street by street, in the villages and towns of Scotland. They want to know when they will get that hip replacement. They want to know why their kid has been left behind in school or is left waiting for mental health treatment. They want to know why they have to live in a cold home. They are looking to this chamber for answers. That is why I'm in politics. It's what keeps me awake at night. Presiding Officer, Liberal Democrats would cut waiting times and abandon the SNP power grab of social care. We would deliver an emergency insulation programme that makes every home a warm one, while slashing our carbon emissions. And we would strive to make our classrooms inviting places to work and to learn by always paying our teachers what they are worth, tackling violence in our schools and scrapping national testing. Liberal Democrats are by nature solutions focused. We are crackling with policy ideas, and my goodness, don't we need some of them right now? Presiding Officer, our world is changing. Scotland faces big international questions. Our world is on fire in the climate emergency. We are witness to the mass displacement of those fleeing unimaginable atrocities, and we will come to look back on this time with an understanding that we were already living in the early days of a new Cold War. These challenges demand a new kind of politics. It is a politics of hope, of democratic reform, a politics of common endeavour across nations that share our values and our corner of this world. So I stand today on that ticket because the Scottish Liberal Democrats are the party of cooperation across these islands, the party of local power through federalism, and yes, the true party of Europe. Make no mistake, there is more water behind this government than lies ahead of it. Change is coming, and Liberal Democrats will be part of what's next. If we want it to, that change could start with this vote this afternoon. We don't have to settle for continuity, for mediocrity, for more of the divisive and dreary same. That other bank could actually be in sight. We just have to reach for it now for a better country. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. In 2021, I put myself forward as my party's candidate for First Minister because I believe Scotland needed a real alternative, an alternative focused on the big challenges that our country was facing. Now, at the end of the Sturgeon era and a fractious SNP leadership election, it's clear that alternative is still needed. This nationalist government is moving further and further away from the real priorities of Scottish people, like helping struggling families through the global cost of living crisis, helping those who want to see our Scottish economy flourish once more, and rebuilding our demoralised and overstretched NHS. Those are the big challenges that we are facing today, and those are the challenges that Scottish people want every single one of us MSPs in this chamber to be laser focused on. Yet instead, we've seen from the party of government them being consumed by the debate on independence and furthering their nationalist obsession. The SNP have been fiddling while Rome burns. They've abdicated responsibility for governing our country in favour of again attempting to reboot their entire campaign for separation. And Hamza Yousaf has been at the forefront of this debate. He has said that every election should be about independence. He has proclaimed himself to be the first activist of the nationalist movement. And yesterday, in his very first act as leader of his party, he demanded another independence referendum from the UK government.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's hear Mr Ross.
An image, if you needed it, that the nationalists have the wrong priorities for this country. Because at a time when our country needs national leadership, we have yet again been given another nationalist leader, but one even more divisive than the last. Hamza Yousaf will not bring Scotland together. He will not focus on the big challenges facing our economy, our public services and families up and down the country. Over the last month, he has been running our NHS part-time while prioritising his own leadership ambitions. In this, his final day as Health Secretary, figures show that just 63% of patients were seen at A&E within the target time, down from 87% when he was given that most important job within government. And his fellow Cabinet member, Kate Forbes, was absolutely right to be scathing about his record in government, and it turns out that almost half of SNP members in this election agreed with her. Scotland needs a real alternative, focused on the big challenges our country is facing, and that's why, as leader of the main opposition party in this chamber, I'm putting myself forward for the position of First Minister. Now, we already know the way the votes are going to go. Hamza Yousaf has stitched up a backroom deal with the Greens to keep his nationalist government in power. I'll just repeat it. Humza Yousaf has stitched up a backroom deal with the Greens to keep his nationalist government in power. And with an anti-growth party within government, sadly Scotland will be the poorer as a result. But today is also about the future, because the contest that the SNP have just been through shows beyond any doubt that the SNP are not invincible, that continued nationalist government in Scotland is not inevitable. As we enter into the post-Sturgeon era, we can see that the post-SNP Scotland is also in reach. A chance to bin the nationalist never-endings and put the real priorities of Scottish people first. It's past time that the SNP paid the price for their failures in government and single-minded focus on dividing our country with another independence referendum. And in communities across Scotland, the Scottish Conservatives are the only party that can beat the SNP in both next year's general election and the next Scottish Parliament election to make that happen. Over the last 2 years, my party has been building a positive programme focused on the real challenges Scotland faces.
Thank you.
I'm not sure why SNP members laugh when I'm about to speak about the Right to Recovery Bill. The Right to Recovery Bill that we published that will tackle Scotland's drug death scandal and has now been endorsed by all sides of this chamber. We set out our plans for a rural development bank to invest in infrastructure that rural communities and farming businesses need to thrive. We're bringing forward a victims' law that would ensure that we place the justice system on the side of victims, not criminals. We set out plans for a rent-to-own model and tax cuts for first-time buyers that would ensure that home ownership in Scotland is not an unaffordable dream, but can become reality. And we have plans to deliver a skills revolution to ensure that every Scot has a right to retrain. These are just some of the positive policies from the platform that we have been building. Presiding Officer, today nationalists in this chamber will give Humza Yousaf a blank cheque to again push forward his party's independence obsession. But in the elections to come, Scotland can make the SNP pay the price for ignoring our real priorities. And in so many areas across Scotland, the Scottish Conservatives are the only party that can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, Scotland's incoming First Minister has been left with an overflowing intrigue to deal with. Our country is in the grip of two devastating crises: an NHS crisis brought about by the current SNP administration's failure to prepare, and a cost-of-living crisis created in Downing Street with rising bills, higher food costs and rampant inflation. Our next First Minister must urgently prioritise these challenges. The people of Scotland will expect nothing less. And they will not forgive a First Minister who chooses instead to focus on their own priorities. I pledge to always put the people's priorities first. Because following Nicola Sturgeon's long period in office, we need a First Minister for all of Scotland, not just a First Minister for half the country. As someone once said, more of the same is an acceptance of mediocrity. Continuity won't cut it. The conclusion of the bitter SNP leadership contest does not bring an end to the division and incompetence that has been on display in recent weeks. And when we look at that entry awaiting in Butte House, it's clear that we need a First Minister without the distractions of a broken political party behind them, and without the culture of secrecy and cover-up which has been the hallmark of 16 years of SNP government. A regime that has left us with record A&E waiting times, with 1 in 7 Scots on an NHS waiting list, record drug deaths, record vacancies for nurses and doctors in our NHS, record levels of homelessness, an entrenched attainment gap, falling business numbers, the ferry scandal, broken promises on green jobs, devastating cuts to councils. And only last week, the damning verdict on child poverty in the Scottish Government's own report. Little recent change. We need change. People across our country are crying out for the answers to the real issues that they are facing. Our task is to show that Scotland can have a better, more exciting and more prosperous future if we unleash our country's potential. A better future for Scotland starts with a plan to unlock the extraordinary talents and innovation of the Scottish people. A plan where we create more highly paid jobs, high-tech industries and more chances to reskill so that working people in Scotland are better off. A Scotland where our public services are once again the envy of the world. Scotland is crying out for change, but a new SNP First Minister isn't going to be enough. Scotland needs something different than a continuity candidate. After years of failure under this SNP administration, we need a First Minister who truly believes in the extraordinary potential of the Scottish people. Because I know our country can do so much better. But we need a First Minister with the political will, the belief in our people and our nation, and the driving ambition to deliver the change Scotland needs. A First Minister with the determination to save our NHS by increasing capacity in A&Es, providing better NHS 24 support, freeing up beds and valuing our NHS staff by improving working conditions. A First Minister willing to listen to the worries of people and businesses across Scotland as they struggle with the cost of living crisis and who is prepared to take action to help. A First Minister who recognises that being green isn't about propping up a failed government in return for ministerial jobs, but is actually about delivering actual green jobs and putting Scotland at the heart of the UK's renewables revolution. It's about having a plan that delivers economic growth and innovation, encourages good business and supports employees. It's about fulfilling the promise of home ownership that has been dashed for far too many in Scotland. And it's about refusing to accept the little recent change is good enough when it comes to tackling poverty, but instead makes it the defining mission of the Office of First Minister. Now, I know everyone in this chamber has made up their mind, and it isn't open to persuasion. But I'm more interested in winning the debate in the country than in this chamber. Because people across this country deserve better than a government focused on their own priorities rather than yours. So my promise to those watching across Scotland: I will work day and night to earn your trust and to win your support. Because this isn't as good as it gets. Change is possible, and I am determined that the Scottish Labour Party I lead will deliver the change Scotland needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call on Hamza Yousaf.
Presiding Officer, it is a privilege of my life to stand before you and fellow MSPs as a nominee for First Minister of Scotland. While I, of course, have made up my mind who I'm voting for, can I thank the other nominees for their remarks. When my predecessor made her opening contribution on this occasion in 2014, she rightly remarked that two female party leaders, herself and Ruth Davidson, being nominated was a good advert for modern Scotland. She was, of course, right. It's also quite a signal of the progress that we have made as a country, as well as a parliament, that two of the candidates putting themselves forward are from our minority ethnic communities. That a majority of MSPs in this parliament belong to parties led by two people of colour, two people of the Muslim faith. And the fact that no one bats an eyelid at this tells me we are making progress in our nation for which we should all be very, very proud indeed. Ahead of the vote, I intend to keep my comments relatively brief. There is no doubt at all that Nicola Sturgeon leaves some very big shoes to fill indeed, as well as her many domestic achievements, which I hope to pay tribute to after Parliament has voted. She has built up an international profile for the office of First Minister, which leaders of many independent countries, never mind devolved governments, could only dream of. The fact that Scotland is playing such a significant role on many of the key international issues of the day, such as tackling climate change, renewable energy, the wellbeing economy, is down in a huge part to her leadership. Everyone holding office of First Minister, no matter their views on Scottish independence, should aspire to do likewise. And if Parliament votes for me today, I pledge that I will continue to ensure that Scotland is a positive, progressive voice on the world stage. Over the last few weeks, I and my fellow SNP candidates have had the pleasure of travelling the length and breadth of Scotland, participating in party hustings, debates, and also meeting with countless local businesses, community groups and members of the public. There's no doubt that people and businesses are feeling the significant pressures of the cost of living crisis. The first job of any First Minister is to keep people safe and to lead them through the tough times. And if elected, that is exactly what I intend to do. But, Presiding Officer, what I've also seen over the last few weeks is that people are optimistic. They are ambitious about the future of Scotland. We must always give people hope. We've come through so much together as a country, particularly in the last few years. And we've demonstrated a resilience that many of us thought we did not have. It is often in the darkest of hours that we see the best of humanity. No more was this true than during, of course, the global pandemic. In tough times, it's often easy to forget how lucky we are to live in a country blessed with such immense natural resources and human talent, one which is brimming with potential and ingenuity. So I very firmly believe that Scotland's best days lie in front of us, and as First Minister, I will work tirelessly to make sure that is the case. Presiding Officer, I have been privileged to hold ministerial office for over a decade, and in that time I think it's fair to say I've been tested in what some people, I'm sure most people would agree, are some of the toughest roles in government. And I've never shied away from those responsibilities. In fact, I see it as an honour to be entrusted with them. I've always believed that leadership is about running towards and embracing challenges, rather than shying away from them. We might not be able to achieve everything we want all of the time and all at once, but every day in office is an opportunity to make things a bit better than they were yesterday. And I will always be impatient to go faster. And if the Chamber chooses me today as their nomination for First Minister, I will never shy away from tackling the big issues that our country faces. I will lead a government that listens carefully and respects the views of all MSPs. My starting point will always be that we all want the best for Scotland and the people that we are so privileged to represent. And I will stand up unequivocally for this Parliament and against any attempts to undermine devolution. I will work every hour of every day to harness the potential of Scotland and every single person in it. I will place no limits on the ambitions that we have collectively for ourselves, for our country, or indeed for the world that we live in.
Before we move on to the vote, there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system.